Sophie Amat from CryptoSense, Mitchell Travers, co-founder of Soulbis, Gaurav Johri from, did I say that properly? Not quite sure. You can tell me, Gaurav, Senior Advisor at AUSTRADE, Helen CEO at Qubit Underwriting, Henrik Andersson, Chief Investment Officer at Apollo Crypto. And the panel up next is titled Fueling the Future, Exploring Investment, Startup and Career Opportunities in the Australian Blockchain and Digital Asset Industry. So let's bring everyone up on stage and make sure that we have everyone here in the meantime. Hi, Mitchell. Sophie, lovely to see you.
Hello.
Wow, super organized. I'm going to turn my camera off and let you go.
Okay, great. Can you hear me? I'm very great. I'm very excited. Helen, if you could bring your camera on, that'd be wonderful as well.
Sorry, it shows that my camera has been stopped by the host, so I can't actually stop the video.
Okay.
Yeah,
maybe
you can't start your video because the host has stopped it.
Got it. Hopefully Blockchain Australia can deal with that.
Yeah, Helen, there you go.
Yes. Yeah, I am the camera. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Well, look, this is my pleasure and privilege to be moderating this panel. I think it's a very exciting theme about investment, startup and career opportunities that are fueling the Australian blockchain industry. I've had an opportunity to speak briefly with everyone here and also to look at some of your research. And I think it'd be great to give a little bit of an overview of every panelist. I think that's a wonderful opportunity, giving of their time to, this conversation. So Mitchell, you're co-founder and advisor at Soulbis, an independent advisor and consultant on decentralized innovation for institutions, governments and ventures. Maybe you just want to come off mute and say a little word or two of welcome.
Yeah, great. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and thank you so much to Blockchain Australia and of course the sponsors for putting this on. Some of the conversations have been fantastic. But yeah, Mitchell, co-founder of Soulbis. At Soulbis, we're sort of digital asset native, independent advisory and consultancy. In terms of my background, I've been in the industry a little while now, 7 or so years. To begin with, I worked at a decentralized identity solution. We then supported with AML, CTF and KYC and IDSP stuff. And then moving on from there, I ran a local digital currency exchange in Australia too. And now, of course, as advisors, we support the industry.
And we'll dive into a little bit more about you as well. So I'll go ahead and introduce the other panelists and give a bit of an overview. Gaurav Johri, wonderful senior trade and investment advisor with AUSTRADE, specializing in fintechs, blockchain and the broader technologies in the marketplace. Maybe you just want to say a word or two. Hello, welcome to everyone.
Hi, Sophie. Hi, everyone. And thank you to Amy Rose, just confirming you did pronounce my name correctly. So,
great.
Yeah, looking forward to the discussion today.
Excellent. Helen, CEO of Qubit Underwriting, an insurance and underwriting business, which is based in Hong Kong. And you specialize, which is super cool, specifically in blockchain-based Web3 businesses. Perhaps you'd like to say a word of welcome as well.
Thank you, everyone, and in particular, thanks to Blockchain Australia for inviting me from Hong Kong. Hopefully, I can share some of my observations about the broader blockchain community from outside of Australia. But we do actually have a lot of partners actually in Australia. So, look forward to talking to you.
Wonderful, fantastic. And then Henrik and Andersson, I hope I got your name right. You are the CIO, Chief Investment Officer at Apollo Capital. It's always great to have, investment money folks here. And I think you manage, according to my my intel, you've got a couple of funds in the market. Is that right? I hope I got that right. Apollo Capital Fund and Apollo Capital Opportunities Fund. Maybe you'd like to say a word of welcome as well to everyone.
Yeah, that's correct, Sophie. Yeah, happy to be here, and thanks to Blockchain Australia. So yeah, I'm the CIO of Apollo Crypto. We're based in Melbourne, and we, as you said, manage crypto funds. We're also a founding partner of Upside DAO, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well.
Brilliant. Well, you can see that we've got quite a diverse panel today, and I think we're in for a treat to really get a good sense of what are the startup investment opportunities career perspectives, and investment opportunities through the lens of each panelist. So I'd like to actually start with a money question. First of all, I'm going to direct it to you, Henrik. So yeah, why don't you give us, I suppose, kind of like the high level trends that you are seeing right now, which is shaping the blockchain industry in Australia specifically, maybe the fundamentals of investing in the Australian blockchain industry right now, and anything that you feel is relevant to share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we invest globally, so I'm happy to talk about kind of the global trends that are going on in the crypto and digital asset space that we have seen in the last 12 months or so. So we invest in everything from Bitcoin to new projects coming to the market from Australia and elsewhere around the world. So on a very high level, the biggest asset in the space is Bitcoin. And I think Bitcoin has actually surprised a lot of people in the last 12 months. It actually didn't perform like a blue chip, low risk asset during the sell-off last year. It had a drawdown of over 65% last year, which was in line with other smaller assets. And that's a bit unusual because usually in the bear market, Bitcoin tend to outperform some of the smaller assets. And this year we have seen the reverse. So Bitcoin has actually outperformed the rest of the digital asset space, which is unusual when the market recovers. So I think we've been in for an unusual 12 months in the crypto markets. There are some probably specifics, that have driven that. And one of them is some new use cases that are coming to the market. So for example, we have seen the emergence of NFTs on Bitcoin. So that's part of it, but there are probably some other factors as well. And then on Ethereum, I think we've seen some big developments there as well. So last year, we had the biggest upgrade in Ethereum we have ever seen when they moved from proof of work to proof of stake. That happened in September last year. We've seen the inflation in Ethereum go down a lot since then. And I think this year we have really seen the emergence of something called liquid staking derivatives, which makes it very easy for anyone to basically get a yield on your Ethereum. Happy to say that in Australia, we have two major liquid staking derivatives projects that are quite notable on a global scale. So I think Australia is continuing to launch projects with global recognition. So I think that's fantastic to see. We have Rocket Pool, which is one of the biggest liquid staking protocols out there. And we have a newer one called Swell Network that we have been backing and supporting as well, that has been growing rapidly more recently. So I think that's great to see. I think Australia has done really well when it comes to launching global crypto projects, and we continue to see that in the market. So that has really been fantastic to see.
That's very encouraging. Thank you, Henrik. And here at Blockchain Australia, the CTO of Swell Network was speaking on Tuesday night in WA Perth, Aaron Alderman. So, I was super excited. He apologized for having a whole shopping list of details he wanted to share, but I think that's why we go to these events, isn't it? I'd like to segue now to you, Mitchell, because, as a startup, if I'm getting this right, the Soulbis, your business, but also what the work you're doing with Soulbound tokens, that ecosystem particularly, that's a very intriguing and interesting innovation. And I think we could have a whole panel devoted to that. But could you give us kind of the high level points about how that particular ecosystem is going to be supportive of, investment and, the future of the industry in Australia or globally?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I guess to provide a little bit of context to the audience, Soulbound tokens as a new tokenized primitive was really launched around this time, if not maybe 15 months ago. So it is still fairly early days in the Soulbound token ecosystem development, and it started off with a white paper called Finding Web3 Soul after a blog post from Vitalik earlier in the 2022. And really, a Soulbound token is a non-transferable reputation-based attribute in sort of a blockchain environment. And what's interesting about Soulbound tokens is this non-transferability means that it doesn't exactly possess capital-based value. So it more is seen as sort of an enhancement on additional tools in the Web3 ecosystem and bringing sort of reputation into a lot of the value transfers that we already see. So I guess to provide almost like a one-liner sentence on explaining the difference between sort of tokens like Bitcoin, Ethereum, or perhaps even ERC20 tokens and stablecoins and soulbound tokens is ERC20 or a cryptographic token possesses capital-based value. So this can be transferred, it can be traded, it can be sort of shared, it can be leveraged, all of these sort of financialization of tokens in a blockchain-based ecosystem. However, in our society, we don't exactly represent value as only capital. If we were to only represent value as capital, we would always descend into plutocracies and it wouldn't necessarily work. And our society is a bit more rich than that. So when we're talking about what else we need reputation-based systems to get this all working and running and valuing the consumer and the person and creating checks and balances in place when we're talking about the internet of value. And that's sort of a blockchain-based ecosystem. So these reputation-based tokens, the current primitive is called soulbound tokens. It's a bit of what I enjoy about the research in soulbound tokens is it is actually mixing and matching a lot of the sort of previous work in Web 2 around decentralized identifiers and a few other digital identity solutions, and then trying to bring them all in into the Web3 ecosystem. So some enhancements are things like wholesale investor certificates or KYC AML travel rule compliance. For example, also achievement badges in gaming is another use case for soulbound tokens. So think of anything that would be tied to you as a person, increase your reputation, but should not be transferred to another person. So something like a university degree, I shouldn't be able to just send my university degree to the person next door because I want to help them get a job. It is my reputation, and how do we represent that in an on-chain environment? Currently, the push is around soulbound tokens and different sort of standards and primitives there. So I can go into that a little bit further. That's what we've been
seeing in the environment, in the space, isn't it? Like this need for assurances about who we're actually interfacing with.
Exactly, and I guess like in terms of more sort of personal or business experience and what Soulbis has been seeing as sort of advisors and researchers in the soulbound token space is a lot of sort of larger institutions and players and Web 2.5 or Web 2 companies seem to make sense of soulbound tokens and are more readily able to adopt them because they're not dealing with capital-based value and financial services and these sorts of extra regulations that need to be put in place when they start operating in those industries. Whereas adopting a soulbound token blockchain-based solution can actually help them feel comfortable getting into the sort of more tokenized economies in the future.
And I'm wondering, Mitch, if it's possible, I don't know, you did share resource documentation with me, if that can be made available, whatever is able to be published, so others who want to know more can get involved. I'd like to segue to you, Helen, at this point. I think it's such a super interesting, perspective as a managing general agent brand in the insurance industry, dealing with non-traditional startups. Why don't you perhaps give us an overview of some of the risks that you were seeing and challenges that you were seeing in being able to, I guess, price businesses within this particular market, and what knock-on effect does that have for investment in Australia and globally?
Okay, thank you, Sophie. And that's a very interesting question, actually, because I was listening to the previous two panelists talking, and what I realized is actually insurance is servicing a very specific subset within the Web3 community. If you think about the kind of risk that we cover, we basically, the largest set of the products that we actually offer to the community is to cover the safety or the security of the wallets. So cold wallets, hot wallets, and anything in between. We're actually looking at HSMs and to the MPCs and also anything in between. But specifically, we're also actually covering like corporate liabilities. So for anybody or any corporate institutions actually investing in I would say deploying blockchain technology or investing in the deploying of blockchain technology, then we actually cover any corporate liability that may arise from doing that. And so oftentimes that means that these companies are involved into transacting cryptocurrencies, but a lot of times actually it may not. When we first started actually researching the market, obviously, well, it drew our attention because a lot of Web3 community members back in 2020 started to ask me. They said that we would like to actually have insurance cover, but doesn't seem like the insurance industry have any readily available products. And at that time, it was the crypto exchanges, custodians, and when they started to launch their business, they wanted to have the, I'll say, the credibility that they would like to come with insurance. So as an endorsement to their internal control, corporate governance, in order to either market to the end users, the customers, or actually to corporations. Over the past 12 months, however, we have seen significant increase in inquiries about corporate liabilities. And my view is this is actually responding to the very complex regulatory regime around the world, in particular, in the US, and we are all, very closely watching what is going on. So that is one of the challenges, speaking of which, that the insurance industry has to deal with. And a lot of the insurance companies actually choose not to touch anything relating to Web3. It's because they believe there is not very clear regulations in the majority part of the world, in the US, for example. And while some countries are trying to develop a regulatory regime, such as in Australia or in Europe, that we know that are trying to do something, but the overall framework has not been tested. When I say tested, it means it has not been tested in court. And there are other regimes, including Hong Kong, starting from this year, has become very, friendly and welcoming. So these are the jurisdictions where insurance companies are more open-minded to actually consider covering corporate liabilities.
So how does Australia fit into that kind of situation then, if that's the case? I mean, are we still an attractive proposition if we are incorporated down under?
The majority of the, I'll say, inquiries, the inbound inquiries from Australia, interestingly enough, are relating to two types of liabilities. One is more related to technology, which actually, I personally was very impressed. We always talk about the fin and the tech, and Hong Kong is more financial than tech, and Australia has a very good balance between fin and tech. So, for example, we have companies coming to us saying they are offering blockchain, consultancy to very large corporations, in particularly to banks, to help them build solutions, right? So that part of business actually has very little to do with regulation. The part to do with regulation includes exchanges. So, for example, right, how should they actually be regulated? Should they actually, handle client funds directly, which is not clear. And this year, in particular, we have received a lot of inquiries about stable coins, interestingly. People are asking us, so can you cover the liability that may arise actually out of stable coins? If 12 months ago, someone actually comes to me and says, stable coin is going to be huge next year, I would be like, really? It's nothing really exciting about it. But this year, interestingly, we have seen a lot of development in that area. So these are my observations from outside of Australia, that what we have observed.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, that's a very interesting development with respect to stable coins. Gaurav, as a representative here today of the Australian government with AUSTRADE and their need to look at internationalizing Australian businesses and attracting businesses here. What is the government perspective at this point in time vis-a-vis investment within the blockchain industry? Do you have any specific or high-level strategic, comments to make about that?
Sure, thanks, Sophie. I think before I get into the detail, it might be useful to kind of talk through how AUSTRADE works with the blockchain sector, because that kind of informs what we see. So we probably have three primary roles within the space. So one is we support Australian companies to access international markets. So we've done a few programs jointly with Blockchain Australia. We took some delegations to Consensus pre-COVID and some other international events as well. And then the second main area is we look to attract international blockchain companies to come to Australia and set up. So for us on the investment side, it's probably a little bit less about financial investment and more about bringing capability and growing the ecosystem here in Australia. And then the third area that we focus on is just generally attraction and promoting Australia. So promoting the capability in Australia to attract international blockchain businesses to set up here, but also to get companies who are looking for a blockchain solution to consider Australia as the place where we have the capability and platforms to solve the problems. So that's kind of the broader context of how we work with the sector. In terms of what we're seeing, I think probably 2 or 3 years ago, the Australian ecosystem was seen in a really positive light globally with a lot of strong talent and capability. I think probably, I know Helen touched on this, but given other jurisdictions have probably been a little bit more proactive in terms of encouraging development, I think Australia is maybe kind of standing pat while other jurisdictions are pulling away. So we've probably seen a leveling off of interest in Australia. And then I think also part of that is a little bit on the regulatory front. I think a lot of the international firms that we deal with, they're adopting a little bit of a wait and see approach. I know many of us are waiting to see what the Department of Treasury is going to do here in Australia. And so I think they've just got a bit of a watching brief on Australia. So hopefully things will shift in the near future. But I think, Australia is well placed, but we need to be mindful that other jurisdictions are moving ahead.
That's a good warning. We've got to improve the initiative taking, not necessarily always waiting for government or the universities, but inside industry itself. And Henrik, I'd like to segue back to you and think about, upside, how do we say it? Yes, the upside DAO. Yeah, tell us about that, because that feels like this could have some really good direct benefits for growth and opportunity here.
Yeah, that's right. So we started what we call Upside DAO last year, and that's really a online community, but it's also a community with a physical space in Melbourne and Sydney for the Web3 industry. So the original members of Upside DAO are a lot of the successful, what I call Generation 1 crypto founders in Australia, from projects like Synthetics, from REM Protocol, from Prepio, from Perion, from DH, from a lot of different successful crypto projects out of Australia. And I think that's a good place if you're a builder in the industry or you're an entrepreneur and you want to get in touch with a community that can offer connections, capital, and coaching. I think that's a perfect community if you're looking to get started in Web3 in Australia, or if you're already established and looking for kind of leveraging all the knowledge from successful founders in Australia. So the website is upsidedao.com.au. So I think if you're an entrepreneur or you're running a Web3 project in Australia, that's a good place to start to get in touch with a vibrant community in Australia. We organize meetups, talks. We had Coinbase last week, for example, here in Melbourne. And we also offer office space if you're looking for a place to work from in either Melbourne or Sydney. So I think, I think one subject you wanted to talk about was careers. So I think, if you're looking to
please make a comment on that. Yes.
Work in Web3, I think that's a good place to check out and get in touch with us.
Wonderful. Yes, and I know people who are attending Upside Down, and I love that connection, capital, and coaching. So yeah, please somebody reach out, put maybe the details down in the chat. I'm going to cycle round for a second round of questions, and hopefully if the panelists can also integrate a commentary on careers as well. I notice we're a little bit light on the touch there. Tell us about the Blockchain Governance Initiative Network. I mean, that's a private think tank, Mitchell, and I think private think tanks potentially have the possibility to really open up and yeah, contribute to, you know, new knowledge, investment, etc. So maybe if you could touch on that, that would be great.
Yeah, of course. So just in terms of like a quick comment on Upside Down, I think that it's fantastic that Australia does have this sort of range of approaches that entrepreneurs and sort of founders and people interested in the industry. So whether or not that's going to the meetups or the co-working spaces and receiving funding from Upside Down or interacting with conferences like BA, we have to keep that going. Now, in terms of an international perspective, in that sense, and this is where sort of Begin or the Blockchain Governance Initiative Network comes in. Over the last 12 months and a part of our Soulbound token research, I've been participating and I've also been nominated as co-chair of the Identity, Key Management and Privacy Working Group for Begin. And the purpose of Begin is to really build a multi-stakeholder global conversation. So create a sort of a venue where regulators, policymakers, entrepreneurs, industry participants, as well as sort of central bankers and sort of multiple stakeholders can come into almost like a Chatham House style environment and discuss the direction the industry is going, some of the technology, and then construct out of that working groups. So this is one of the working groups that I'm a part of, the Key Management and Privacy one. And then the result of those working groups is publishing papers, and I linked one earlier on soulbound tokens. So I guess just as a sort of overall overarching view and to answer the career opportunity question in this light as well, is that there are a lot of public goods organizations out there. So it's my opinion that a blockchain or a decentralized network, DAG whatsoever, is actually a public good. So if we're going to operate in this space and leverage the benefits of public goods, then perhaps we should also give a little bit back and contribute in the same vein. So part of the culture at Soulbis is we actually give 10% of our time, our consultancy hours to public goods works every week. Now Begin is just one of them. Some of the working groups in Blockchain Australia that I participate in are also part of that basket. And I just think that as a general culture, and if you are looking to sort of get into the Web3 industry in a career sense, this is actually one way that you can leapfrog your way in whilst still working in Web2, still working in your other day job. Maybe contribute to public goods first, see if it is a good vector for you, get access to some of the brilliant minds of this space who are discussing the most important issues, contribute to a paper. One of the beautiful things about sort of decentralized philosophies and that a lot of the people in this industry prescribe to is it is permissionless. So you can just be a student, come in, provide an opinion, and go from there and contribute. So yeah, I just wanted to give you a shout out to that sort of global network that I'm a part of, and how that can also enhance sort of the Australian blockchain community too, and breed collaboration internationally.
Thanks very much, Mitchell. I agree with that. You know, if one has the capacity to, you know, to give back, I think from the industry, that I think is really helping us so much. I see that there's a time check coming up at 2:40, so we're going to squeeze out another 4 minutes. Don't worry, panelists. I'd like to come to you now, Helen. So walk us through from the perspective of the insurance industry, like what do you see opening up? You've talked about risks, but in terms of developments within the sector globally in Australia, and maybe touch on careers as you see them, because you really get into the weeds of businesses. You've got to do more in-depth due diligence than probably even bankers. So
That's a very good question, Sophie. Yes, before I answer that question, I do want to quantify my answer first, because again, when people talk about the Web3 community, a lot of people immediately actually connect that to decentralized organizations, right? So the part of the business or the community that I deal with, or Qubit deals with, is actually the centralized part of it. So I wanted to quantify that first. And I also wanted to say is, you know, even though people believe the spirit of Web3 is decentralization, the fact is actually when we move to that direction, the support, the transition, the infrastructure, and even the culture changes, it still needs a lot of support, and it needs the centralized part of the entire society to actually move together. And it is a process. So that is the segment of the market that we service with. So yes, you're right that, you know, for us, it's very important that we actually underwrite the business. We look at the internal control, we look at the corporate governance, we look at the robustness of the business model. And yes, people may question to say, how do you actually look at this? And I accept the fact is we look at it, we try to adopt a more you know, a revised way so that we understand the ecosystem, we understand the value chain, and then therefore within this spectrum, we actually can say, is this something, you know, in the hundreds of companies that we have examined and we have underwritten, are they, you know, falling into something we believe will be more robust than others? Are we absolutely right? I can't say that because we don't have the data, right? Fundamentally, this is a very new industry, so we don't have the data. What we have done is we have actually built a database that includes all the incidents that has ever actually happened in this industry in the past 10 years. Some of them are very well known, it's in the public, some of them are not. It's not covered by the media, and there are private forums, there are private, you know, data source, and we try to collate all of them, and we try to evaluate a company based on that understanding of over 680 incidents that have happened actually over the past 12 years. Now, the common theme that we have seen, and which is actually quite interesting, and this probably will, you know, service as a, I would say, kind of reminder to the entrepreneurs and people starting up business in this sector, is internal control is very, very important. It is not something that you say, okay, when I get there, when I get the money, when I get the resources, I will do it. It is a sort of, you are building a guardian of yourself to your own business. Oftentimes we have seen a very, you know, bustling, very promising business coming to us, and when we check the history and we realize a little bit of, you know, tiny silly mistakes, and that mistake is not something so innovative. It is not something that we have never seen before. Oftentimes it is the mistakes and or the risks or the breach that we have seen over and over again in both the centralized and the decentralized world. So I see great opportunity also for young people. It's also in this area. It is about, you know, internal control, it's about risk management. And I think for this industry to go very far, and that is the area that would definitely need some talent.
Thanks very much. That's great. And, you know, centralized part of the industry is probably the thin edge of the wedge, where we have more clarity at this point. Gaurav, I'd like to give you the final 30 seconds, 1 minute. You know, please give us your best shot from the point of view of how AUSTRADE, you know, sees the career opportunities within this sector, and any other final comments you would like to make.
Sure. I think from our perspective, we're very interested in the role of blockchain solutions in the energy transition and the move towards net zero. So given the importance of trust and transparency in terms of tracking emissions, we're very, very interested in platforms that have ability to solve problems in that realm. And so I think just segueing lastly into the career section, I think, you know, I'm a non-technical person. My background is banking and fintech. And so I think given the extent of problems that blockchain solutions can solve, I think there's room for people who have domain expertise outside of Web3. And, you know, if you're not a Web3 specialist, you should feel like your skills do have use in the blockchain and Web3 space. So I think I'll leave it at that, given we're pretty much hit our time. Thanks, Sophie.
And I'd really like to thank all of the panelists, Henrik, Mitchell, Helen, Gaurav. Thank you so much for contributing your talent, your expertise, and your passion for the industry. Handing it back over to you now, Amy Rose.
Thank you, Sophie. Wonderful job in moderating that. And that's actually really interesting. I think we could probably hone into the careers as well as an industry moving forward. Yesterday at Blockchain Week on day 3, we did have a deep dive with young people and youth, and there were some opportunities from TAFE Queensland as well. But moving the next generation into the future of our industry, I think should be a focus for the whole industry. Moving forward, we have Caroline Bauer and